And then maybe I missed it, but the resolution DPI that you didn't set it, you didn't bother
We
to
didn't set it
anyway.
yet, because it doesn't matter so much for the preview scan, it matters for the final.
That's so much fun.
Is that how it was, or is it backwards? Did we get it right?
Yeah, no, that's right.
Okay, cool. Okay, so now you can see it gives us this thumbnail of the image that we're going to work with. And so then what we need to do is we need to go through and adjust our histogram, like our color settings and things. So over here we have some controls. We can rotate it, we can flip it, we can do some different things. But since it's in the right orientation, we don't need to worry about that. Down here we have the size that we're viewing it at. So right now it's kind of at a small thumbnail size. If I click on this full size of one frame, that'll take us to a larger image so we can see a little bit better when we're doing our adjustments. So we're going to edit this image and we're going to use our adjustments here. So underneath where we were looking at document size and resolution, then we have adjustments. And so we have a few different tools. We have auto exposure, we have histogram adjustment, which is essentially levels, and then we have kind of a curves tool and tone correction, image adjustment, which is another sort of color tool, and color palette. So typically when you're scanning, you don't want to do a whole lot of your adjustments in the scan software. You want to get it so that you're not clipping any information off your histograms, right? And mainly you want to get the color sort of in the ballpark, right? Just so you're making sure you're capturing all the information in the negative. You're not shifted really heavily in your color scale, so you get these weird like differences between your, say, your reds and your greens or something, where you want everything to be sort of in the general right range, and then your refined color correction will be done after the fact in Photoshop or Lightroom or whatever software you're using. So I'm going to open up the histograms adjustment by clicking on that tool, and it'll bring it up over here. Now, if you were doing color, you have your RGB channels as well, but since this is black and white, we're just going to be working in the overall histogram channel. So we have our input and our output. So what I do, first thing I do is I just slide my output all the way out to the edges. So I go to 0 and to 255 for my blacks and whites, and then I start adjusting my histogram up here. So mainly what you want to focus on is first making sure you're not clipping off the ends on your black point and your white point. So you can see on the histogram I have these sliders down at the bottom. So I have a black, a gray, and a white, and I can move these around. Those are setting your black point and your white point. So you're telling it, if I position my black point here, it's telling the software that at 51, that's where my true black is. So I'm just bringing my black point up to that area of my image. If I brought it all the way out, I'd be telling it my black point's at 0, but you can see my histogram doesn't start until over here. So all of this information is just, there's nothing there, and it's essentially making my shadowed areas just kind of grayed out. So I do want to bring my black point into the edge of my histogram to tell it that's where my black point starts, and then the same with my white point, saying this is where the negative falls off. That's where my whites are, and it's really right in those points of light on the chandelier. Now that's real dark, obviously, but that's because I have my middle gray now set to too dark. So I need to slide this until my tonality in my image looks generally sort of right. And maybe that's kind of around here. Now, what you'll notice is when you're doing these scans, they're all gonna come out like kind of flat, generally speaking. That's because we're getting the whole tonal range in there, and we'll deal with contrast and all that afterwards. If we were to adjust these until it looked sort of right, then maybe sort of like this, and over in here kind of looks better, but you can see we're clipping there in the histogram, and we don't want to do that. So in the scan, you're mainly just trying to capture all of the image data from the negative, and then getting the overall kind of exposure where you want it, something like that, and then dealing with contrast and and all those sorts of things afterwards in Photoshop.
Question, Nathan.
Yeah.
What happens if you do end up like going too far, like that black point, you go too far out?
Too far this way?
Yeah, what, when you end up, I mean, what does that have?
It's not the worst thing in the world because when you get into like Photoshop,